Hello, everyone. This is Liz Bramlett coming to you from our training center, and we're going to spend the next few minutes discussing implications of having either fixed or floating home units at your development. So what's the difference between a fixed and a floating unit, and what does it mean to us? First of all, as the words imply, units fixed are listed in the regulatory agreement as the fixed home units, and it means that for the entire home period of affordability, the same units will always be considered the home units of that project. Of floating home units, the regulatory agreement for the home program tied to that project will list the original home units, and then it will list the units that the designation can float to. And you can't just float to any unit, because in order to float to a different unit, the unit you're floating the designation to has to be comparable to the original home unit. Now, in July 2013, HUD issued a new final rule for the home program, and it was a big deal when it was issued. It was the first major update to the home program in more than 17 years. And they did a lot of tightening and tweaking to the home program and improving some of the regulations and the standards that they expect owners to live up to. In the new final rule, it states that a participating jurisdiction designate if a project's home units will be fixed or floating by the time they commit the home funds. They want it stated whether or not they're fixed or floating that soon, because that will influence how the owner is required to implement their income targeting requirements to demonstrate compliance with the home program. The owner must provide their participating jurisdiction with the specific addresses for their home units later than at initial occupancy rather than at project completion. So they tightened up how quickly is the units have to be designated as either fixed or floating at a particular project, but they gave the owner a little more time to tell the PD exactly which of their units will either be their fixed home units or original floating units. At a home project, you have both low home and high home units, and it's very important that the owner and property management know which are their low home units, which are their high home units, and how many of each their regulatory agreement requires them to maintain at their project. And how they maintain that correct mix of both low home and high home units depends on if the units are fixed or if they float. There is an available unit rule for the home program, which management is required to implement as they do annual recertifications. Find that a low home residence income goes above 50% of the AMI, the very low income limit, which is the income limit for low home units. Your income is still below the low income limit, still below 80% of the AMI. The unit switches from being designated a low home to being a high home unit. The owner that has to implement the home available unit rule to make sure that they bring the project back into compliance and maintain the required mix of low home and high home units. Remember that in a lot of cases, our home units are also tax credit units. So you want to make sure, even though you're switching a unit's home designation from low home to high home, that you remember, is it a tax credit unit? In addition to that, that if it is a tax credit unit, never charge the tenant more than the maximum tax credit rent. Now, an increase in a resident's income results in the project now being short of a low home unit. If these are fixed, then the owner must rent the next available home unit to a low home resident. If it's are floating, the owner must rent the next available comparable unit to a low home residence. We do an annual recertification. A home residence income rises above the low income limit. In other words, their income rises above 80% of the AMI. They do not have to get out. None of these rules require that a resident who experiences a jump in income has to get out of move from their unit or get out of the project or anything like that. But is discovered, the OS charge them the less of the permitted by law, with a nod recognition that in some jurisdiction the residents are covered by something like rent control or rent stabilization, percent of the resident's income or comparable market rent. But again, remember, if this unit is still a tax credit unit, never charge them more than the tax credit rent, because no matter what happens to their income, you do not want to jeopardize the unit's ability to continue to produce a tax credit for the investor. Here's an example of a blended home tax credit unit. The home is $500. The tax credit rent is $600. The market rent is $800. And maximum rent then is going to be $500 because a blended unit, so we have to charge them no more than the lesser of the home rent or the tax credit rent. We have this resident, we find that their income has jumped above 8% of the AMI. We calculate 30% of their adjusted income to now be $680. Their minimum rent for their unit is still only $600. This is still a tax credit unit, so we don't want to charge them more than the tax credit rent. An example, we have 100% tax credit 10-unit property. All are two-bedroom units. The home units float. We for low home residents and for high home residents. And the high home and tax credit income limit both is 60% of the AMI. We know the home income limit is always 50% of the AMI. Low home rent is $500. The high home rent is $600. The tax credit rent is $580. We have low home tenants' income has jumped above 80% of the AMI. So they were home, so we weren't charging them more than $500. They'll become high home for the home program, but it's a 100% tax credit building, so we will take them above $580, the maximum allowable tax credit rent. Let me know if you have any questions about the home program or any other questions about affordable housing where I may be able to help. The website is right there for you, LizBramlettConsulting.com. Your phone number and my email address. You can follow me on Twitter, and please do connect with me on LinkedIn. I look forward to talking with you in the future. Bye-bye.